Hello, my name is Bob Baig, and I'm recording this video for Kathy. She's a good family friend. She asked me to share my experiences as a naturalized American, and I'd be happy to share my experiences. I have some questions just to give some structure to the conversation, so let's start with that. The first question was, where did you live before you came to America? I lived in Karachi, Pakistan. Both my parents were from India, but India and Pakistan had a very violent breakup in 1947. Both my parents left India and settled in Pakistan, and I was born and raised in Karachi for the most part. Karachi is the largest city in the country. Second question, can you give a brief explanation of what that was like? I was very fortunate. My dad was a senior officer in the Air Force. He was officer commanding maintenance wing, so all the aircraft maintenance was under my dad's command, and so we were lived very well, and we were very fortunate. I didn't know any different, but over the years I've come to realize that we were very fortunate in the lifestyle and the quality we enjoyed. Question, what made you choose to move to the U.S.? Had you lived in another country before? I did not live anywhere else. America was my first big trip overseas. Uh, the decision to come to America, it sort of happened during my teenage years, as I made the transition from a child to a young man, trying to get a sense of who I was. I found that my views were out of step with the extended environment around me. In Pakistan and to a very large extent in Eastern cultures, there's a very high emphasis on conformity. You have to toe the line. You have to stay with your quote-unquote tribe. I will use the word tribe repeatedly in my chat. It's not the literal sense of the word, but the figurative sense of the word. The group that you belong to that gives you your identity, your cultural heritage, your extended family, and so on. And so I found that based on my reading and research as a young man in my teenage and early 20s, I increasingly fell out of step with my tribe. I became secular minded, and I am a big I have a big concern about social justice, and I'm liberal minded. Even America, we're a right of center country here. Even here, I have some challenges fitting in and sort of finding my fitting, even in a blue state like Massachusetts, where I'm currently residing. And so I can well imagine if I had stayed back, it would have been a very, very difficult for me to find a community and a sense of belonging in Karachi. So I'm glad I made the decision that I did. Question, what made uh, next question, what were your biggest cultural shock and experiences? Uh, I came to the U.S. I landed in Houston, Texas, to go to grad school. Got a master's in computer science there, and I still remember my first real cultural shock was when I stepped out of the campus, which was actually in a very densely populated part of the city. I was like, where is everybody? I don't see anybody on foot. Everybody is in cars, and basically the walkways are deserted. And Karachi, in terms of population density, is kind of comparable to New York City. And so as soon as you step out of your door, there's people everywhere. And I just had this amazing surprise at where everybody was in Houston, Texas, and how come everybody was in cars and you never saw anybody on foot. So that was a big surprise for me. And another surprise was my impression was that Christmas would be kind of like Mardi Gras is. So I thought it would be a festive time of the year, and people would be out and about and celebrating, happy, and backslapping each other and saying Merry Christmas to each other. And obviously, it was another, the streets got really quiet, and I was very surprised where everybody went. I thought I said to myself, I thought they'd be celebrating, and it looks like they're all indoors. So that was another interesting cultural surprise. Another one was that Karachi and Houston have somewhat comparable weather. They're very hot and they're very muggy. And after living for a while in Houston, I moved my wife to Boston, to the extended Boston area. And the short days really were a challenge. To some extent, they are to this day. I've been here 25 plus years. It was a big challenge. I suffered from a medical condition called SAD, or seasonal affective disorder, which makes me very lethargic and sleepy during the shortest weeks and months of the year. And only recently have I started to be more even keeled through the entire year and not be so affected by it. So these were some of my challenges in assimilation. Question. Did you experience any prejudice? And I have to say I've been very fortunate. I think it's a combination of factors. I primarily lived in the urban centers or close to the urban centers where there's a lot of people from all over, and so I didn't stick out so much. Also, I'm just respectful. I understood a lot of American culture even before I set foot here, and so I really cannot readily recall any issue that I felt was overt or hurtful racism. Question. What were the most positive results of living in the U.S.? And I'd say the most positive result was that I did find things the way they were in terms of freedom of expression. Eastern culture that I touched on is they just don't want to hear. If you're too far out of the mainstream, they don't want to hear what you have to say. It's better to be quiet to avoid physical injury. And here you have a much greater ability to voice your views. I'm a big believer in social justice. I speak out quite clearly about it. And I know and I understand that as a nation we are right of center. My views are a little bit out of the mainstream even here, but I do not feel concerned about my physical safety when I view my when I express my views, and it's a very gratifying feeling to be able to speak up. Question. What were the hardest things about living in the U.S.? Coming back to my T word, which is my favorite word, the tribe, there's an incredible sense of isolation that every immigrant has to live with. It's a burden you bear, it's a cross you carry, and you take it to your grave. You never get past it. Walking away and leaving my extended friends, family, I grew up in a very close-knit extended family. They are now halfway around the world. I see Facebook postings of weddings and funerals and so on, and I feel isolated. I'm halfway around the world away from it. It's a very heavy burden to carry. I'm very fortunate that I have a loving wife. We started a family very late, and I have a young child, and they definitely help me cope with it. But that really is the biggest challenge, and it's not unique just to me. I think it is a challenge for every person who lives the extended family and moves to another part of the world. Question. If you could do it all over again but have the same wife and child anywhere in the world, would you still choose to live in America, and why? It would not be as much of a slam dunk today as it was 25 years ago for me. I am very liberal-minded, and I believe a lot in social justice, and America is a right-of-center country. I think we always have been. I feel more drawn to the Eastern cultures and their greater emphasis on social justice. But a dear friend who lived in the U.S. for a while, he had to leave the country for 6 months for visa challenges. But after he went and spent 6 months in a very nice part of London. And yet when he had a chance to come back, once the issues were resolved, He did not waste a minute coming right back to the U.S., and that tells you something. He certainly told me that the grass is greener on the other side, but I'm very happy and lucky to be exactly where I am. Question: what would you say to Americans about immigrants? It's I really think America, with our long history of immigrants, we're a nation of immigrants. I think we're doing a pretty good job dealing with immigrants. The burden of assimilation is on immigrants. I do think it needs to be managed so that the local culture is not overwhelmed. So assimilation takes a little bit of time. The first generation American people, people like me, we will never fully assimilate. It is almost impossible, in my opinion, after 25 years in the United States. And I've gone further than virtually anybody I know. It will be really up to our kids and our grandkids to fully become a part of the fabric of this great country. Um, the most important thing I would say is let's try and be respectful for each other. Let's not hurt each other. And I personally didn't really experience any challenge in this area, but I think other people do. And if I could reach out to some friends, folks on the other side of this video, to just bite your tongue if you have to. Sometimes things can get rough, but give them a break. They have a lot to learn. Next question. Do you have anything you would like to add to this conversation or advice for Americans? Again, I say this, I'll preface my conclusion by saying that I understand as a nation we are right of center. I am way left-leaning, liberal-minded, but even though I'm secular, some of the biblical sayings have a lot of resonance with me. And I do believe, to loosely quote, that I can, if I go to bed with a full belly and a safe home, but my neighbor is going to bed hungry and his kids are crying and he's suffering, there will be blowback. It will impact my happiness. If we as a nation paid a little bit more, just a little bit more, we do a lot, but if we paid a little bit more attention to social justice and paid a little bit more care to our neighbor, I firmly believe that it will end up coming back to us, multiplied many times over, and improve the quality of life for everybody, even for the people who are doing the reaching out. So I would call for a little bit more social justice. A lot has been accomplished, but a lot more needs to be done. Thanks.